welcome to the E29 Journeys podcast. And we are very, very delighted. Well, but it's just me, but I'm very delighted to have my guest in today. Another one of my former players and now friend. And this is actually going to hopefully take the show up a level on the intellectual side. Hoping I can stay with him. He always kind of talked a little over my head just because his brain works so much faster than mine. But anyway, I want to start by introducing our sponsors, Resilient Real Estate, Adam Schwartz, 100% Media, and they do all of the video editing and all of our filming and things that we need to put this somewhat small show on and help me put it onto YouTube. So I want to thank our sponsors for that. And today I want to welcome our special guest, Dr. Matt Diaz.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited. I've seen a lot of these, so it's going to be interesting to see how it goes.
Oh, so you're the guy that watches. I always wanted to meet him. You know, I can probably still reach out and talk to our 75 or whatever I have on there, but it's different. Like I said, there's so much stuff on, and you know, when I started doing this and it kind of turned into let's do more of them, all of a sudden you start seeing everybody popping up with them, and everybody's got one. And so it was self-serving. Like I started to tell you, when we started doing it, it was just all of these coaches and players that I never get to see. Mm-hmm. And as you know now, most of the time I text everybody, but I rarely get a chance to sit down and chat. Even if I go to the games, I can catch somebody 5-10 minutes before the game. Afterwards, they're with the team or they're trying to get on the bus or head back to the hotel. So it's maybe 4 or 5 minutes there. But sitting down and having a full-blown conversation with someone is almost impossible now because everybody's got different things going. You know, over the last year with COVID, it was hard with everybody's different situations. You know, you have people living with you at home and kids and things like that. So it was just it was something that I started that for me, it was kind of cool to be able to sit down and talk to people I hadn't had a chance to talk with. Yeah. And nobody really had anything pressing over their head, you know, because a lot of the games were shut down, a lot of the practices were shut down. So I was fortunate to get people to come out like you, and I couldn't really offer them anything. We don't have a budget on the show other than, you know, my credit card.
I don't think I'm legally allowed to accept anything with my contract anyway. So
okay, well then that makes it perfect. I won't even solicit free medical advice today. We won't do that. We could actually do that. Have you ever heard that show on Sunday mornings on ESPN?
I don't think I have.
Dr. Clapper. It's a weekend warrior show. So guys call in and talk about injuries that they have, and he kind of gives them a background and a couple little tips on how to treat that tweaked knee or whatever you got from softball. Or
you just probably have to know the most common thing for 2 or 3 different joints: shoulders, back, knees.
It's mostly him talking, and the guys just kind of call in with something to throw at him. So, you know, it could be a way to go if you got some downtime. Do it from your house. Just take phone calls But anyway, so I'll kind of flip it over to you. As we were talking about before, it's just kind of us talking about things and catching up. And so, you know, when I was thinking about this morning, I was thinking about some of the things to ask. And I've had a couple people that have sent me things on text and said, hey, let's not talk about this today, or let's not talk about, okay, that's fine. But as far as I know, I don't think we have anything that I'll bring up that, you know, no skeletons or anything like that.
No, I mean, the only thing is I probably can't talk too much legally about Kaiser Permanente, who's my employer. Okay. I'll just give a quick introduction. You know, I played for Coach for you back in 2001, 2002. Yeah. And then, I graduated high school in 2003, went to UCLA after for undergraduate, and then I went to Western University's medical school from 2009 to 2008 to 2012, and then I went to residency for 3 years, and then I've been with Kaiser Permanente since 2015. I do family medicine. I do more medical stuff than procedural. I round in hospitals at Ontario Medical Center, and I haven't yet done Fontana Medical Center, but could. I work some with the residency in the family medicine residency, and then I'm also a junior faculty with the medical school, Kaiser's new medical school. The inaugural class just finished their first year. So, you know, despite my parents trying to direct me away from education, I seem to find my way back. Yeah. But yeah, it's really interesting. I started a couple years ago. I have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, so I started the whole baseball journey from the beginning again as an observer, and had to learn how to be very distant, right? Just making sure that they love the game and have fun, so that they learn to, so that they can progress.
Sure.
And try to not be the detailed, minute coach that I was of myself and others at the higher levels. But other than that, I've been living the dream.
Well, let me backtrack a little bit, and then just for kind of reference, because when you talk about somebody or the high school kids and you talk about going into medicine or being a doctor, kind of usually how you generalize it. From start to finish, how many years of education did you put in to that?
So there's 13 years from kindergarten to high school, to graduating high school. I decided I had a very long major. I was initially going to double major in biology and mathematics, but they're so independently different that, so UCLA has a unit cap, right? So they don't want you to be an undergraduate forever, so there's a maximum amount of classes you can take. And so what they did is they created a new major several years before I started. It's called mathematics with applied sciences, applied health sciences, I believe is the formal term. And so I was like 2 classes away from the maximum amount of classes I could take as an undergraduate. And so rather than having an extraordinarily stressful 4 years, I decided my 3rd, 4th, and 5th year to be a little bit easier, to try to also help boost my GPA. And so, I remember, when you were my head coach as a junior, you really were pushing, for players to try to get into at the collegiate level. And, I was very limited. I didn't have a strong arm. I was a small, pudgy first baseman. And so, but, I hit for average decently well. And so, I was getting all the academic schools that were D3. Harvey Mudd was the one that was really looking at. But I decided to go to UCLA and be an average to smart student rather than go to Harvey Mudd and be a jock.
Yeah.
And it's something where it's daunting, right? Going in knowing that you want to do this. It's so I did 5 years of undergraduate, then 4 years of medical school, and then 3 years of residency, which is the minimum amount of a residency before I'm formally an attending, right? So practicing on my own, being able to do what I want to do. So that is 9, if you include residency, that's 12 years before I'm a formal practicing physician, independent, if I can do whatever I want at that point. Right. So it's a lot, but just kind of like with baseball, right? You focus on the next at bat, you focus on the next day, what I have to do that day studying, right? And I love sports in general, but I feel baseball helped to prepare for medicine, particularly because we are always analyzing failures and what we call near misses to make sure that we do everything we can to protect patients in the future. We learn from our mistakes, and 70% of the time you fail and you're doing a good job in baseball. Yeah. And so being able to analyze what you did in that poor swing or how to attack a certain pitch, when you spend all this time focusing on a low and away curveball, and it really helped preparing me for studying, I think, more than school did, because school came easy to me, to be able to make sure that I'm analyzing all of the small things that I do on a daily basis so that I am, hyper vigilant to help make sure that I protect my patients as best I can.
Sure. Well, just listening to that, and that's something where I'm thinking for a person that was in your position, even as a high school sophomore, to start calculating, okay, do I really want to go into medicine? One, you had to be very high academically in high school. You couldn't be just an average student. Correct. Because as you were talking about going to UCLA and being an average student, I remember when Nick was in here and he and I were talking, because he still works at UCLA, and he was telling me, and this was probably 5 years ago, he was saying that they had 22,000 applicants, and I think he said the median GPA was 4.2. Yeah. And I was telling that to a couple of my high school guys, and I said, there's not a lot of 2.8s. in those applications.
Right.
You don't get a 4.2 median with a lot of, so, to say that you're going to be a middle student at some place like that, and your grades weren't anything to scoff at. You're valedictorian.
Correct.
So how many valedictorians across the country
pretty much
probably didn't get into UCLA,
a lot of them.
And you kind of think that's the standard in high school. Hey, if I'm one of the valedictorians, I'm doing pretty good. And then there's schools that still check me off and say, no, we've got someone else.
Yeah.
And so then to go into that field and essentially just flip over and start again, because you were saying 12 years.
Yeah.
After you just finished 12 years.
Yeah.
And you're going to do another 12 years. And not the same type of 12 years. You compare your last 12 to your first 12, and it's completely and you said have a non-stressful last 2 years. Well, I don't think there was anything non-stressful about the classes that you were taking compared to what most people would consider non-stressful. I didn't think there was PEs or music appreciation. When I say non-stressful, that's what I'm thinking.
Rocks for jocks.
Yeah, some easy, exactly. Hey, turn the lights on and we'll give you an A. But that type of thing, just having to mentally put yourself in that position to say, okay, I just finished and I'm going to start all over again, and it's going to be twice as hard as the first round.
I mean, so it's interesting, right? Every level you go on with baseball, there's more at stake, right? You can't just make outs. You have to be able to move a runner over. You have to be able to hit the sac fly. You have to, I remember you focused a lot in winter ball for, we had to bunt the first 2 strikes. So we learned how to bunt because we were going to be a small ball team. I had to do a lot of work regularly in order to be the player I was, because I had a couple of guys that were above me that were, barking down my neck trying to get playing time. And I never had to work hard academically until I got to college. And so if it wasn't for baseball, I don't think I wouldn't be where I am now. It taught me how to work. It taught me how to learn from failure. It taught me how to accept failure and move on. But it's a whole nother ball game when I went to UCLA, right? You get that slap in the face. I had not gotten a B my entire academic career until I got to UCLA. And so it's one of those things where, you learn, you're like, okay, how did I fail? What did I do wrong? Let me go ahead and turn around and make sure I do what I need to do so that doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
And it just the next level still, right? I learned how to do it. And then there's the gap between high school and UCLA medical school was just as wide.
Yeah.
And so you gain a work ethic because you set a bar for yourself. But that work ethic has to change with every level. And I imagine that's equivalent from going from high school baseball to college baseball and college baseball in a minor leagues.
Sure.
It's when I work, I'm pulling 14 to 16 hour days. If it's answering emails, refilling medications, evaluating lab results and next steps, doing reading, in particular for the last year, it's like there were times where I was doing less patient care, but all of that extra time was put towards, because guidelines were coming out sometimes, different guidelines on same day for COVID. And so it's something where, I've never been put in this scenario, but I most likely will be. And I have to make sure that I'm prepared so that one patient gets the best out of me. And it's one of those things where now the motivation's easy, right? Because, I have been in the ICU taking care of patients or in the hospital or losing patients unexpectedly that are on my panel outpatient. And I have faces that I'm going to carry with me the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And making sure that doesn't happen is a huge ordeal, right? And, turning back to sports, like I remember, I still remember that last out. I was the last out of us trying to climb back in the 2002 CIF, right? They were hugging the line. I had a fastball down, and the guy took 2 steps and was 6 inches off the line and caught what would have been a double in any other scenario. Yeah. Or like I remember I was just so anxious when I was going up there starting, and I got 0-2. The guy was probably throwing, low 90s, high 80s, and I was just completely overmatched, and then he plunked me right in the back, and it hurt so bad that I got so pissed that I just started playing.
Yeah.
And I remember slipping off the third baseline because they had those kind of succulent weeds,
Right.
and I could have got new cleats, but I didn't because I was superstitious, and so I didn't. I had maybe a centimeter of metal left, and all of those things I still replay in my head now, and I think that's just part of who I am, professionally. But the work that I did in baseball, prepared me 100% for medicine. And I think, once you get to the high school level and you really say, okay, this is what I want to do and I want to be the best player that I can, and you start to put in that work, it's going to apply to whatever you want to do. And it's going to, separate you from people who are just relying on talent, or like I had said earlier, right? Those people that are doing just enough work so they don't get fired, but they also want to set the bar low so that you can disappoint on a regular basis. I'm not that type of person.
Yeah.
And there are docs that are like that too, unfortunately. They just relied on their talent of their ability to memorize things or understand things quickly, and they're lazy physicians.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, most all of us are patients, and you've all experienced that. So it was a lot of work, but the ability to next at bat, right? That psychology that's built into you at a young age in baseball, I think is really been serving for me as a person, and as a professional.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you had mentioned, there's a lot of things in there that I was going to pull and have you follow up on, but going back to the first one, you talked about how as you advance in school, it becomes a little bit more intense and a little bit more difficult. And, as a player, you remember that pyramid that they tell you that everyone plays Little League and then high school, and then, this many people make it to the majors. Well, it's probably the same with medical school. Like you said, you got all these people that go into it at UCLA or whatever medical school, and then they go into your next phase of that. And I don't know if you know the numbers specifically. I don't, but like with baseball, they tell you the percentage is 2% out of every, of all the physicians or would-be students that go in to become physicians. How many of them actually come out on the other end as physicians?
Yeah, I don't
finish,
know.
I guess.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. I know, and part of it is it's skewed because UCLA produces the most medical students of any university, at least when I was there.
Right.
And so, it was inherently competitive because, you have this term called gunner, right? Those guys those people who study exceptionally hard want to, they set the curve, as we call it, right? And that's something that was definitely unique when I went to UCLA, is that curve. And so it doesn't matter, percentage wise anymore. It's not like 60% a D, 70% a C, 80% a B. And so if it's an easy test, one question can separate you from an A and a B. And that is directly analogous to baseball, right? If the ball gets changed, or if the mound's a little higher, or if the pitching across is weak, then all of the batting averages raise, all of the OPS numbers go up, and so it's how good are you relative to all of your other players at your given position is a big ordeal. But I mean, it's kind of intense, right? I have some people I joined medical school with who couldn't survive, and so they got into some debt, and then they had to leave school because the school kicked them out because they weren't able to cut it. And I have friends that graduated medical school but couldn't cut it in a residency, and so now they're a doctor but they aren't able to practice, they aren't able to sit for a board exam. And then I have friends that did all of that but still aren't practicing. And so there are these levels of weeding you out, like you think you make it when you get to college, and then you think you make it when you get to medical school, and it's just constantly wearing on you.
Which, I mean, and that's very interesting too, because you go back to like what we had talked about, and you could kind of see, at least from a coaching perspective, and other coaches I've had in here, we've talked about that too, that I think you get to a point where baseball is your classroom, but that's not necessarily what we're trying to teach. It's, for me, it's a fun way to get across a message, something that I'm comfortable with. I couldn't teach a math class because I'd be 100% focused on trying to do it myself, let alone be able to give anything other than that. So, you see, like you had mentioned, those bits of hard work. And if you're a guy that's going to stay after and run extra, or a guy that's going to get there early and take extra work, or you're going to work on your own independently, then you can already see that's the makings of someone that's going to be successful in their own business. There's always going to be separators in every line of work, like you had mentioned. You know, there's people that just get by in every job, but the ones that separate themselves are the ones that try to make something unique or try to give themselves something that no other person has. And when you had mentioned doctors, you know, we've all got into those places where maybe you're the guy right before lunch, you know, and excuse me. And I get that too, because with the job that we do, when I talk to John and the other guys, I said, what's draining about our job sometimes is that each person that comes in, you have to be 100%, and it resets after an hour or resets after half an hour. And so that last player that comes in doesn't know that you've been there for 5 hours, 6 hours, or hot or hungry, whatever. You've got to give him the same energy. Same way with the doctors. You know, if he's there at 7:30 doing whatever he needs to do, and he starts patients at 9 and he goes all the way till 3, patient number 1 is only concerned about patient number 1. And then at 3 o'clock, that patient wants full attention, full focus, so that part of it is the mental part that you get from practicing and all that type of thing too, where, you know, I may be tired, but I need to work on this, so I'm going to stay a little longer, or I'm going to have the discipline to keep practicing it, even though I'm failing it most of the time, but eventually that's going to turn over. So it's just interesting. And like I was telling you, I like bringing in people from a baseball or a sports background and being able to relay how that applies. Because, you know, when probably you more than most, but most of the time, if you're a sophomore or freshman, you don't understand it. You hear it all the time. This is going to help you later in life, or this is how you're building your work ethic, but you don't realize it until you actually have to apply it. So it's kind of neat.
And you know, most of the time, like I didn't even probably realize it until I started to do a postmortem. Once I usually finish something, right? It's because you're just in it, right? Long days, short weeks, short years. Right, because everything goes by so fast because you're always so busy. Right, and you know, you had mentioned that I usually am in the office at 6:30 in the morning, and I usually leave at 5:30 or 6:30 in the evening on normal days. And the idea is that I don't get to leave until the work's done. Right, and that work is usually, I have my patient load, but then I also have independent work that I have to do to help take care of the patients I saw prior, and then I also have to do the work that I have to do to make sure I understand potentially an exceptionally rare medical condition that one of my patients has, so that I can get them to where they need to go, if that's a specialist or if that's, you know, following up with them over the phone. And so, right, you know, it's kind of like a practice. You come in and you have the idea of what coach wants you to accomplish for the day, but then I also have to set a bar for what I need to do, if that's working off the tee, if that's long toss, if that's, you know, as a first baseman, getting more pick work in, you know, situational stuff to make sure that I'm prepared for any situation that might come off. Like one of my weaknesses was, you know, playing a cutoff man, working on a poor throw and making sure I'm still getting my feet positioned well to be able to throw it home. That's a very high leverage situation that comes across maybe 3 or 4 times in the course of the year. But if I'm not prepared for that very important play can cost W's, and that is the biggest of all, statistics. And so, you know, having to come in and that would probably be one of the big things I would have the young guys do, is say, okay, yeah, coach has an idea of what we want to do for the day, but then also setting a goal for what is it, picking one thing, I'm going to work on this, and spending 15 minutes before practice, or most of the time I'd recommend after practice, so that way you're tired and you're starting to ingrain muscle memory into situations like that. But you know, it's a whole nother ball game when, you know, and I have to thank my dad a lot for that, right? Is he was always behind the scenes, and I didn't understand it until he started to kind of release things as I was an adult in medical school or whatnot. And, you know, and it's because he always kind of knew, I think my brother's an attorney, I'm a physician, that we were going to be doing something along those lines. and that work ethic in baseball was going to, do things like that. Like even at a young age, right? My uncle would do a lot of water. He worked with the water district later on, but he would do reinstall what's the term? Sprinkler systems.
Mhm.
And so every summer my dad would have us go with him, and he would tell my uncle, hey, have him do this, you know, and have him lift and carry heavy things. And it would always be 90, 100, 110 degrees. And we hated it, but retrospectively, it helped build that grit.
Yeah.
And that grit was super important to, you know, all aspects of life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's interesting because now you're not quite at that age where I am, but now that you have sons, you can kind of see where there's that fine line, you know, and I would hear a lot, and I almost want to say it kind of ended at your generation, and then everything turned to be a little bit more, well, let's not put them through that.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that letting your kids experience some things, even if it's to learn this is what I don't want to do, and motivate them to do something beyond that so they don't have to, I think it's a good situation. And, you know, when you were talking about how long your day is, I first thing I thought was continuing education.
Yeah.
And I don't know that, you know, when we talked about how long you were in through high school and then through medical school, residency, and essentially going another 12 years, well, that even there doesn't mean you're at the top going, okay, I've got it.
Yeah.
Because as you'd mentioned, there's things that come across constantly that you have to learn or relearn or re-educate yourself, or continuing education, because you're always going to come up on different things, especially in the medical field, as fast as things change. So I think sometimes when students are thinking about careers, not all careers do that. No. You know, there's some things that maybe change and you have to kind of polish up on, but if you're in an environment like you, it's almost daily. Yeah. So there's really not a time where you can say, okay, I know everything there is to know about medicine and I'm good now. Yeah. Now I just practice and go.
Well, I mean, it's built into my license. I have to do 50 hours rather. It feels like 50 years, 50 hours of conferences or learning every year in order to maintain my ability to practice in the state of California. And so that's independent of everything I mentioned earlier as my daily activity. And to be honest though, right, which is part of the whole, you know, going back to my boys, you know, it's something where I feel that there's even more weight on me. Right now, my wife's a teacher. My parents were both teachers for over 30 years. And there was this change of, you know, kind of 50% or 33% the system, 33% teacher, 33% parents for how the education for the students went. Now there seems to be more weighted on teachers and more blaming of the system and the students from the parents. Sure. And so, but conversely, I feel that there's more weight on me to be able to instill that grit and that work ethic on my boys than I think probably would have been earlier when I was growing up. And you know, there's probably different things that I won't completely understand and that are probably teaching them in ways that I won't understand until my boys are older. But I can't do anything about that. I have to do with what I know. Yeah. And so it's even now, right? It's like chores around the house, right? It's teaching them how to manage money at a young age. And, you know, when they're tired, having them work through the frustration that comes with having to deal with that so that they can still push through. Sure. You know, and that's something, you know, they might not like baseball. And I'm sure any sport will teach them things. I only know baseball relatively well, so I speak from that perspective. But of course, anything they choose to go in, it's going to be that extra time that separates them. And even if they choose not to go into medicine or the law or whatever it might be, that work ethic will allow them to become that professional that they want to be. Sure. And if not all professions require it, it'll allow them to continue to learn and become a supervisor or, you know, whatever it is they want to do at a very high level. Well, and I think you mentioned a word a couple times, and it applies to, I think it's actually a separator when you say professional, because we've talked about it in baseball before. You know, there's, Nick and I have had this conversation quite a bit. He said there's a lot of guys that he came up with that they were drafted and they were in the minors, and according to them, they've made it. Yeah. That's it. And he says, well, that's not a professional. Professional is understanding that every day you go out is your job, and I need to try to get better. They're giving me this time in the minors or wherever they assign me to prove myself and get better. And he tells me a story one time about how it used to drive him crazy when guys would complain about
never getting their chance, or no one ever comes to watch me from the organization. No one ever works with me with the organization. And he would tell them, he says, you're playing here every day. This is your opportunity.
Yep.
You know, if you ever want to play at the highest level, it starts here.
Yeah.
You know, no one is going to take you from A ball, put you in Dodger Stadium and say, go show us what you can do.
Yeah.
You got to prove it all the way up.
Correct.
And that's part of the professionalism. You know, I can't complain when they are giving me an opportunity. They're giving me an opportunity, and they're giving me all of the tools I need, access to information, you know, food, cages, everything I need to improve. What I decide to do with it is on me. It's not 100%. On someone else.
Yeah.
And that works with everybody.
I mean, you know, and what you do in games carries a lot of weight, I imagine, in that scenario.
Sure.
But just as much, particularly right when you're drafted, it's how you utilize the tools that are given to you outside of the game. And, you know, because guys that are good teammates, that work hard, when they are, you know, when they are put into an equal scenario with guys with same stats, they're going to get chosen every time. And, you know, you don't know when your opportunity for getting noticed is going to come.
Sure.
And so the assumption is you need to have the work ethic as if today is that day when someone's going to come and watch me and change my professional life.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to put yourself into that position, and it takes time for growth.
Sure.
You know, both with work ethic and mindset to be able to get you there. And so, you know, it's going to be harder, I feel, when there's less focus from multiple people, when everybody's special and everybody has to be given the time. You know, you have to make a decision at what point, what age is this something where I'm going to try to get something out of it. And if it's not hard, then you're not getting something out of it.
Sure. Yeah.
And baseball, I think, is the best, in my mind, one of the best sports to do that, because it's hard all the time, right? If you're hitting 500 and, you know, it's probably something where you need to change levels so that you have some failure mixed in to some of those successes, so that you can learn from that, because failure is the best teacher. Yeah.
Which is hard to convince a lot of people now. Yeah. And I think, you know, with your kids, when you do that, and I've talked a little bit to like Mike and Herb about it. They had asked me one time with their daughters, you know, about softball, and I said, absolutely not. He said, what do you mean? I told Mike, I said, well, you know, both you and your wife are tall. I said, teach her how to play golf, teach her how to play tennis. I go, be the dad in the white polo shirt and white polo shorts, sitting up in the stands and watching her hit with the tennis coach, you know, in the nice clubs, and, you know, instead of the dirty softball fields, and getting up at the crack of dawn and doing all that. And Herb's daughter was playing golf with his dad. And he goes, yeah, she loves golfing with Grandpa. I said, perfect, go do that. Yeah. And he goes, well, why? I go, because she can do that till she's 70. Yeah. And I said, if you go and you don't know anything about it, you're not going to be bugging her about it. You're not going to be correcting her all the time, and it's not going to be a source of conflict. Yep. And if she likes going out and playing with Grandpa, and then she likes going out and having fun with you because you're not a know-it-all, she's going to want to do it more. Yeah. I said, but if you're playing softball and she's playing softball, what do you think you're going to do every time she makes an out? Correct. He's like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm like, she's going to enjoy it a lot more, and she's going to want to be involved in it all the time. I go, and it's something that you guys can do together, and there's no pressure, because she's probably going to beat you. Yeah. And you're just going to have to have fun. You're just going to have fun and do it. Yeah. But, you know, for the boys, I think it's just trying to get them to try different things. And I've kind of come around on that, where just the way things are right now kind of dictate that you have to pick a sport early. But I think it kind of feels like things are changing, where there's a lot more opportunity for kids to do both, even maybe up until they're about 10, 11, and then kind of narrow it down to one or two. You can do both. It just means you got to work hard at both if you want to play them competitive. Yeah. If you want to just do it for fun and exercise, then try them. But if you generally want to compete at a higher level, then you're either going to have the discipline to practice on your own a lot, or you're going to have to make that choice. But I think anything, just getting them to start and finish things was always big. Most of the parents I talked to that had said, no, we told them they're going to finish out the season, even if they don't like it, you know, and then if they don't 100%. Want to do it again, you know, I think that's something that's really important for kids. And then I think just getting them to enjoy the practice part of it. You know, I know as a kid, games are fun, and a lot of the parents, when I tell them, it's not, as they get older, they need to understand you actually play less. Yeah. Your practices are twice as often as you're going to play games. So get used to that part of it. And if you genuinely enjoy tennis, then it doesn't matter. I'll go out and we'll just hit. If you genuinely golf, you're not going to have to be in a tournament to enjoy it.
Yep.
So it's just finding something that you enjoy just playing for the sake of playing,
yep.
which is hard now, I think.
Well, I mean, that's what Kobe had said, right? You have to love the process. If you don't love the process, you're not going to be great.
Right.
And so learning to enjoy the work and being able to see the progress, right? I mean, I lost the exact number, but I believe it's like if you read an hour a day on any subject, in 7 years, you'll be an expert, right? And I think that kind of comes from if you do that work every day and you focus on it and you flip the page every day, you'll be much better in ways that you probably won't even understand when you start the process. And so I think that's the hard part is, right, teaching the kids to love the work and to learn from failure is something I think that probably comes from the parents more than anything, but especially now it has to come from the parents. And, and it's something where, we don't know yet how screens are going to affect kids, for example.
Sure.
Right. I mean, it was 13 years ago, the first iPhone came out. And so we're just starting, like the American Academy of Pediatrics is just starting about a year or two ago coming out with recommendations for screen time for ages. And so this whole generation is a guinea pig in ways that we don't even understand.
Right.
And so, it's, and that's kind of, going aside, it's kind of one of the frustrating parts when people come at me with different things about the COVID vaccine. It's like, great. You have that diligence about with you in other ways. Analyze everything, and just because other people do it doesn't necessarily mean you should do it for yourself. But when there's evidence out there, familiarize yourself with the evidence, understand how the evidence comes about, and then make your educated opinion rather. And there's just not a lot of diligence when it comes, at least from my experience. I mean, I've been locked inside with, I've lost a lot of those, a year and a half, a couple of, 3-4 seasons of different sports with my kids. Cause I think it's, you're right. By the time they're 10 and 11, that's kind of where they're like, okay, I want to do this, or I want to do that. And then that's when you dive in deep with them. But you have to, it's every day, right? My kids are like, oh my gosh, I don't want to put away the dishes, or, oh my gosh. And then, and then my oldest is 2 years older than my youngest. And so he has a lot more responsibility. And so he can't see it. He just thinks there's this lack of equity between him and his brother. But at the same time, my youngest is complaining, why don't I get to do that? Why does my oldest James get to do that?
Right.
And I can't. And it's just this constant battle.
Well, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, right. And I see it now, like as an older sibling, right?
You got to that point now.
And I almost want to make it harder for my oldest because I feel that it tremendously helped me at this point.
Well, it's tough because my daughter is an only child, and so she has her best friend that's getting married in September. So she was over all the time. So there was not that brother friction because they both got pretty much equal because they were both only children. So that worked out. But, a lot of that when I have siblings that come in and work with me, I'll tell the parents, well, I'm going to initially work with them together because I need to see how that works. Because I know being an older brother, there's going to be good days and bad days. And there's some days where they're going to be on each other from minute one and we're going to separate. And there's going to be times where everybody's working together and we'll stick with that. And I said, but my hope is that somewhere down the road, they're going to, if brother one misses something, brother two is going to hear it and vice versa. Yeah. And so then maybe between the two of them, they can figure it out down the road. So it's just really tough, especially with the age gaps too, because now I feel like the younger kids are getting the same information as the older ones, whether they should or they shouldn't. But like you said, if my older brother has a cell phone, then why don't I have a cell phone?
Correct.
Regardless that I'm 3 years younger, I just see him having fun and I want to do the same thing. So it's those lines have kind of blurred now, and I feel like just in general, they're learning things at a younger age, which is good in some ways. But again, like you said, it falls on the parents to dictate what they should learn. Exactly. Because I think they're seeing a lot of things that we probably didn't see until we were 12 or 13 or, in some cases like me, I probably shouldn't have seen until I was 25 or 30. But it's kind of scary. I mean, in a way, I'm glad mine's your age. So I'm past that point. It's just the younger ones that I worry about. Things. I
mean, I live in Orange County, right? And my son was in kindergarten and they had at that time the brand new iPhone 11. A kindergartner. I'm like, what are they going to do with that? Watch Cocomelon?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the problem, right? As we get more social and branch out, right? It's not just, my older brother has this and I want one. It's my classmate has it and I want one. And so setting concrete boundaries of, no, you're not going to get a phone until you're in 6th grade or whatever you choose. I mean, kids don't have tablets, or if they do, they get to use our iPad. It's mine, right? They play Nintendo Switch and it's mine, and they use it for a certain period of time. And and I think it's also teaching them, right, that there are boundaries. You can't just anticipate having fun every moment of every day for the rest of your life.
Sure. And
that work is a part of every day. Even if you're not at school, which is their work. But so that's why, going back to having fun and learning how to have fun with baseball is really important to me, because then it's working to get better to have fun.
Sure.
And that work becomes part of the fun aspect of things. And so it's this really delicate balance that we have to walk. And, I think too, it's something where just because other kids are doing it and doesn't mean that it's necessarily right for you or it's right for us. And so it's the hard part for me isn't teaching my kids how to work. The hard part is teaching me how much work and the appropriate work for that age group. And, and then also learning how to cut back a little bit, because my expectations are always, probably 2 levels above my kids at all times. And so, that's part of the reason why it was nice to just kind of, we went on vacation this last week, and, there was no television, there was no screens, and it was just about being together and having fun and reconnecting, and having those moments within practices and the work is valuable too.
Well, it's essentially another form of peer pressure, because you can set boundaries in your house, but you can't really control what happens outside. And again, you can't control how others parent. And so if you're kind of operating on a work reward system at home and it's working, and then all of a sudden Billy's mom just gives it to him because Billy throws a tantrum, well, now all of a sudden, why isn't this working for me? And it just creates more and more. And so I know that with coaching, I mean, and I'll use you guys as an example. I mean, at least I don't think I used a threat system. It was more just I wanted you guys to just understand the process, because there's satisfaction in that. Whether wins and losses are going to take care of themselves. But if you go out and you execute everything that you worked on, and you execute the way you wanted it to work on, then you walk away fine no matter what, because you did everything that you could possibly control. And then you go back, like you said, and you reevaluate, okay, well, what can we get better at? What can we try to excel at? And so that trying to evaluate to improve, I think, is something too that with the kids you can kind of work off that reward system. Wow, okay, you know what, if I did dishes and I cleaned my room, then I get an hour of screen time. So now if I do this, and this, then I'm going to get an allowance, and then I can go and get my own, so they kind of always are moving their own bar up. And so I don't think it's necessarily being too high with your expectations. Like you said, it goes back to how you're handling it when they don't meet them. Because I think that's more of a great teaching tool, because we're not always going to meet our own expectations, but it doesn't mean we can't start over and go after them again.
Exactly. Right. And, at my kid's age, it's more about, okay, what are you feeling? I'm sad, or I'm mad. Why are you mad? Because I didn't get this and my brother got that. Okay, well, why did your brother get that? Oh, because he did this and I didn't do that. Okay, well, now you understand what you need to do in order to get those things. And, it's and going back to how you coached, right? That season, the off season work that we did, conditioning wise, right? It was a grind, and it was really hard for several weeks until we got physically conditioned enough, but we were doing it together, and we all hated it together. And we had to do the I forget exactly, right, but you go from home plate to foul pole back to home, and there was Andres, who was always the slowest guy, but once we realized that if he didn't finish in time, we had to keep going. There was our fastest guys back there working with him, so that it wasn't as much of a strain on them, but they were lifting up that weakest link. And so there was psychological teachings to the physical game that allowed us to play at our physical best. And I had watched one of your previous podcasts, and you had mentioned, right, that you're not just a coach to high school players. They're a therapist, right, working through breakups and all these other things.
Yeah.
And right, it's taken everything, right? Like, so for me, right, if I had a really difficult patient where I just said, no, you're not getting narcotics, or, they had, where we're working through different side effects of their alcoholism or whatever it might have been. And then having someone yell at you because they're projecting their negative feelings about the situation, being able to shake that off, taking a deep breath, and enter the next patient room and just being for them 100%, not carrying that negative thing with me. That was 100% baseball to me. Yeah. Right. I remember my junior year, I was 2 strikeouts away from setting the school record for strikeouts in a season, and I was throwing out golden sombreros, like 15 games in a row, and I was like, I can't hit the broadside of a barn. I'm seeing the ball, and my bat is always 6 inches away from it.
Right.
But yet you kept putting me in the 3, 4, 5 position to hit, and I was like, what is coach doing? Right? Like, I'm sucking. The team's certain. Just either don't play me or put me lower in the lineup, and then it finally just clicked, and all of a sudden I started taking off, and I wish I would have been able to turn that game around for us, and we would have won our first CIF playoff game in a long time. And I understood, right? I understood that sometimes you have to suck, right? Like, I was really bad at because we do system-based teaching in medical school. So like the kidneys, that was just really hard, and I sucked, but I was done. And I moved on, and I had to work on the next one. And so, we're going to suck at things in life. We're not all perfect. And if you are perfect in everything you're doing, then you're not challenging yourself. And so, that lesson is something I look back on and help propel me through this, that, I can get through this just like I got through that. And a lot of times, as 16-year-olds, because we always want to look cool and look good, we don't ever go through things that we typically fail at. And so that's where I think sports really comes into play.
Well, and it's interesting, and you mentioned that, because the thought process behind that was more something that I talk to parents now about. I said the thing that I always enjoyed about baseball, and I played other sports, but baseball, it was never the same. And so I guess maybe with my short attention span, sometimes that works, because there's a lot of times where you just want to zip your bag up and go take it. Yeah. I'm not coming back tomorrow. Yeah. But the best players are the guys that'll walk off the field after that 0 for 3. I don't care. Tomorrow I'm still the best hitter here. I'm still going to go 3 for 3 tomorrow, because there's so many things that have to go right in your swing and to get on base. And then talking to players, you talk about the games that you think about. You go, wow, there's probably games where I hit the ball 3-4 times square in the middle.
Right at people.
And then there's days where I didn't do one thing right. I hit it off the cap, hit it off the nub. It died right before the third baseman. The guy didn't make the throw in time, or, and I am 3 for 3, but I never hit the ball harder than, off the handle. So there's always ways to get back into it, and then trying to get players to believe in themselves was the hardest thing. Yeah. So much time when you're younger, especially, you're always looking for that praise to give you your motivation. But I've always said the guys that are going to be the most successful in sports have a lot of a-hole in them. because you're arrogant. Yeah. I don't care that I'm 0 for 30. I'm still the best player out here. And you almost have to. Yeah. As a pitcher, I don't care that my ERA is 7 point whatever. I'm still the best pitcher. I've got good stuff. I just need to move that ball 3 inches this way or 2 inches down, and I'm right there. And so that's kind of that mentality that's hard to build, because once you get people believing in themselves, then I almost feel like whether everyone else thinks they can do it or not, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Because you can accomplish it. And it's just hard to get that across, especially to younger guys. Because like you said, just by nature, you just don't have that ego. Yeah. You're really fragile about how you're seen and how you're portrayed, and how it always used to always tell the story how it would give me a kick when you guys, because we were way up there at Rancho, and that was one of the things I loved about that field. It was way off. Yeah. So we never saw Steve Ferreira, that works with us now, is the AD at Rancho. Okay. And so I always joke with him. I'm like, hey, we never saw the AD up there because it was too far. I go, he had to go past the basketball courts. He had to go past the softball field. I go, we could have done whatever we wanted out there. And so.
And often did.
And that's so. But you guys would get the slip to come to the office, and you'd go in the dugout and you'd put all your clothes on, and then go down. I'm like, you're coming back. Well, yeah, but I don't want to walk across the campus in my uniform. You got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
You're wearing a uniform that you earned, and you don't want to wear it? You want to put street clothes on and go all the way back down, then come back and take your clothes back?
No, yeah. I mean, it's, and it's kind of going back to what you had said, right? It's something my wife is really conscientious about, and I'm having to learn, right? When my kids do something I want them to do as part of the goal of something, I'll tell them, good job.
Yeah.
And they'll come and be like, look, Mommy, look at what I did. And she'll be like, well, are you proud of yourself? And they were like, yeah. And she's like, well, that's great. Right. And so the internal validation is something, right? Being able to set a goal for yourself and achieve that goal is something that, because of some of the changing culture with the external praise, I think is more difficult to achieve. And in baseball particularly, right, if you're searching for that external validation at a young age, it's the sport's gonna eat you alive.
Yeah.
And so I think it's even more important now to try to teach them that, so that they can grow and learn to love things, because if you love something that's easy, then it's going to be hard when you're part of external validation, because everybody's going to be good at it. And then simultaneously, you're always going to be comparing yourself to others when you grow into an adult, and that it just is a way to brood towards, unhappiness.
Yeah.
Especially in the age of social media, when everybody's putting out this farce of a face.
Sure.
And that's probably only going to grow as our kids get older.
Yeah. That's like when you were saying that, I was thinking about that line from League of Their Own where Tom Hanks tells her, what's the hard that makes it great?
Exactly.
If it was 100%. Something that everybody could do, then why would you want to do it?
Exactly.
But it's just so, so interesting that something that's frustrating has probably frustrated me more than anything else is something that I would always come back to. There's been 2 or 3 points in my life where I know I could have jumped off, but I always ended up back on there again. And it was mostly because of that, because there's always been, and I assume it's like a chess player or someone that plays a backgammon or something like that, but you see all these moving pieces and you think in your brain there's got to be a way to beat it. There's got to be a way that you can go out there every single, I guess it's almost like a gambler, when you have that gambling addiction, and you're happy with 52%. Well, 50% is still winning by gambling standards, but you're by no means an expert at it.
Yeah.
And so with baseball, it's the same way. You can do everything absolutely correct and still wind up on the losing end. So you go back again and you're trying to rethink of better ways, or how to get the most out of players, or how to get this player to understand something so he can jump up another level.
Yeah.
And it's just it's that constant kind of stimulation that kind of keeps me involved and watching things and understanding how now, when kids come through the door, we talk about how it's more of a pride swallowing thing, because they have access to more information, more tools, more knowledge than 10 years ago, than 20 years ago. And so essentially a lot of the 12-year-olds come in and they have more ability than a lot of the 14, 15-year-olds, and then even then I kind of wonder, where's the game going to be in 20 years? Yeah. When every kid understands what they're doing by the time they're age 9. Now it's just a matter of, how's my body going to fill out? Am I going to be bigger, stronger, faster? And what position, I'll know what position I'm geared for by the time I'm 8 as opposed to high school. So it's just one of those things where it's a game, but it constantly creates a lot of thinking and rethinking and evaluation.
Yeah.
So.
And I think, kind of going on with the whole sticky stuff in MLB now, it's what MLB decided and the Players Association decided to do moving forward, I think, is going to really redefine the game. Like, I'm a Dodger fan, and we're sucking the last 4 games. Got no hit by a guy who's a wannabe, Greg Maddux and Zach Davies last night. But it's Oral Hershiser several, 20, 30 games ago had said, the next step is putting a sensor inside the ball so that pitchers can see what my spin rate is with different grips on the ball. And pretty soon everyone's going to know their optimal grip. And it's something where and the game has gone to the 3-2 outcomes and it's all statistically based. I mean, it's provided, it's allowed the Rays to be the Rays and, smaller market teams to compete but it's also something where, now it's like the game is almost broken, right? Like the Dodgers are in this position where they're all walking, which is considered a win in a 3-2 outcomes, but they're not putting runs on the board.
Right.
And so it's exactly the same thing as those things get figured out at the highest level, they're going to come down and affect the youngest players. And then it's like, then you lose those skills. The bunt is almost dead. And, the being a bit, the good out of moving a runner over might be dead soon. And yet you see like the Padres in almost every game against the Dodgers, they're stealing bases, which you're not supposed to do. They're laying down bunts. They're beating the shift because the Dodgers shift more than any other team. And it's just logical things. But because the statisticians said this is how you have to play the game, it is almost broken at times. And the Padres, I think, are going to continue to beat the Dodgers until Roberts decides we're going to actually we see this is how they're trying to beat us, and we have to try to play them straight up again. And I think the Dodgers are going to continue to get beat until they decide to move a little bit further away. I mean, it took the Dodgers, took Roberts trusting Julio Urias when he's, the numbers say he's not supposed to be out there to finally win a championship. Yeah. And I think that's the thing for baseball purists is that you have to. There's a gut aspect of this game that has yet to be quantified numerically. That is still going to be exceptionally important, and so it's going to take a team like the Padres. Granted, they are very good on paper to do things that the numbers say not to do and win a championship before I think things finally decide to get redefined.
Well, I'm even way more old school than you are. I think that a lot of the things that, like you said, I think a lot of things were changed based on what they looked at over a small window. And like you said, because a lot of these teams followed that roadmap, that's why the game went that way. And all of a sudden you start seeing before, the strike zone was this way, east and west, and now it's gone north and south. Okay, guys are long and getting the ball down there low. Now if I've got velocity, I'm going to come up in the zone. And, that can change all the time. You can change where you throw consistently. And I don't think, the shift, like I said, I don't think that's as big of a deal as anybody else because, again, I think that actually forces you. If you're a left-handed hitter and everybody's swinging over to that side of the field, what are they telling you? Telling you can't hit the ball the other way. Yeah. But 30 years ago, they were telling you to hit the ball the other way. Yeah. Well, now here we are complaining about the shift. But you know what? If you learned how to hit the ball the other way, they're not going to shift on you. Yep. So it's
Trent Grisham is the perfect player for that, right? Yeah. I mean, he's extraordinarily talented, but he bunts, he hits the other way on shifts, and then when teams don't shift, he then plays to his strength, which is to pull the ball. And it's just, and you see Machado starting to do that, which he finally swallowed his ego some, which is still monumentally huge. But like you see a shift, he's going to try to beat the shift in situations where he wants to beat the shift. And the fact that he's grown as a player and he's stealing bases where he hasn't done that for years since he was in the first couple years in the big leagues. They're having a ton of success when they want to have success. Sure. Right. So it's like when they're focused and their intensity levels up like they were against the Dodgers, even though they played really poorly their previous 10 games, they're going to be able to beat anybody because of that focus. Yeah. And, and it's really old school, which is why I think I can never remember his name, but the Padres manager has done an excellent job with them because he's like, this is what we got to do. You go out and do it, and then they execute. Yeah.
Our main goal is still to win games. Yeah. And I get it. You get paid on stats. You get paid on all of these things that, show up on the video games and get you on posters. But if we're actually going to win, this is how we have to play. Yep. And if you look at the elevated strikeouts that they talk about, it's essentially the same group of guys. It's not everybody across the board because you look, there's still guys hitting in the high 280s, 290s. Those guys are going to hit. And, you go back and you listen to some of these old guys talk about facing guys like Gibson and Koufax. And, as a hitter, as a professional, there's certain pitchers that are just going to give me rough days.
Yeah, but DeGrom every time.
Yeah, okay, so you're not facing him every day. Yeah. But if you're still getting worked over by a middle reliever from, the Cardinals, okay, then that's probably a you problem. It's not a baseball problem. Yep. And so there's a lot of ways to equal it out, and I think it's just part of the problem is they're trying to to make the changes so it's more favorable to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the part of it that is making more of a problem than anything else.
Correct.
Because those changes, okay, you don't like the shift because your favorite player keeps hitting into it, so nobody's going to watch because your favorite player is not on there. Well, if your favorite player is a guy that can actually play and they don't shift on him, he's probably a better player than your favorite player.
Yeah.
Or, if you don't like pitching, then you're probably not going to watch a lot of the game from the middle 5 down, because all you're going to see is guys that come in and throw 90. Your pitchers are essentially the first 4 or 5 innings, and those are the guys that are going to throw 3 pitches.
Mm-hmm.
After 5, it's just guys that are going to come in, and as soon as this guy gets a little tired, we'll bring another guy that throws 97, and then another guy.
Yep.
So that's where I think most of your strikeouts are going to come from.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at guys like DeGrom and Darvish, Darvish has good stuff. That's why he's striking out 11 guys in a game.
Yeah.
And he's not doing it with extremely high velocity.
Mm-hmm.
He's throwing a number of pitches. He's throwing different locations. So
his pitches are different too. Like he'll throw cutters that are 81 to 89 miles an hour, and they each do different things.
Yeah. So and then here you are on the other side saying that the pitchers are throwing so high velocity. That's why. Well, he just struck guys out, and he never broke 97.
Yeah. 100%.
So it's not all of what they're looking at. I think it's just they're not going to be able to get the best of both worlds.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to get the NFL viewership.
No.
Not with games every night. It's just tough.
Mm-hmm.
And you look now, even after, I think COVID has a lot to do with it, but if you watch games, there's more people in the stadiums. But on a Tuesday night, Angels, Royals, you're not going to get a full house.
Correct.
For a
100%.
meaningless game. It's just baseball's never been like that. So I think that the numbers that they're looking for, it's not. And then now I think just the growth of other sports.
Mm-hmm.
There's cornhole on TV, for God's sakes. There's,
right.
So there's
Spike
something.
ball.
Yeah, there's something for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
There's just too many options, I think, for people to sit and watch all the time. I watch football more. To be honest with you, I probably won't watch as much this year because I'm not gambling anymore. But I like the sequence of it because I watch certain teams, and what I've actually grown to like more is watching how teams adjust. Mm-hmm. You watch that first half, and you look at a team, and you're like, oh, they're going to get absolutely killed. And then they come out all of a sudden, and everything's different.
Yep.
They had a chance to reevaluate, go in, make some changes, move some guys, change some personnel. Now all of a sudden it's a whole different game.
Yeah.
So you can see the thinking part of it more. Or, you watch and you see that guy running into the left side of the line, 1 yard, no yards, lost to 1 yard. And you're like, why does he keep doing that? And then in the fourth quarter when they need it,
the cutback.
He goes for 50 yards, and all of a sudden that changes the game there. So I think it's just how you appreciate games too is a lot of it. And you're not going to have everybody appreciate everything. Like I can't sit and watch poker on TV. Some people do that.
More difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's more what you like, and there's just too many options for people too.
Yeah. Well, part of the problem I think too is that, I don't know necessarily that guys, if from their second AB to their third AB on the same pitcher, are going to change their perspective. It's more that they are very good at what they do and they have seen it 2 times prior.
Yeah.
Which is also kind of frustrating, right? And, Oral Hershiser again talks about this, right? Is that the art of pitching is, maybe saving something for a guy on that third AB so that you can still be elite in that third AB. And so the idea, I think, is that there has been that shift in pitching, spin rate, and getting guys out of the game in that third AB with certain guys who just hit 400 or 500 against a pitcher on their third AB, and yet we haven't seen that adjustment, I think, yet from hitters in the sense of trying to change their approach with different guys depending on what your weakness is.
Yeah.
And so it's all about strength versus strength, and that, I think, has driven the game away from some of what it was, which is, passing the baton, getting on base, hitting the other way. And, it's not glamorous. And I think that's the main problem, right? Is like, what was it? The Astros had a 10-game win streak and hit 22 bombs and had given up 21 runs in that stretch. The Astros viewership is probably off the charts because that's a really fun game to watch if you're an Astros fan. But I guess it's the same thing with me. It's like I love watching games that are close, where they're strategizing over how to get that 1-1 across. Whereas MLB's searching for that crooked number on every inning and getting 11-10 games. And I'm like, that's not fun to me.
Yeah.
Because it's like a 2-run lead used to be a huge lead that felt insurmountable, whereas now it's just you get a walk and a jack, and all of a sudden you're losing again.
Yeah.
And so it's just too much of an emotional roller coaster for me. And I think it's hard, and that's part of the reason why I think there's going to be a strike is that, one, they're already far apart, the Players Association and the commissioner's office, but two, I think the commissioner's going to really try to come at it hard to try to mold the game and what they think they need to make more money, as opposed to just saying, this is our niche, let's just stick with it and keep it. And so I'm a little worried about what that's going to do, both recovering from a strike and trying to gain viewership simultaneously. And,
I think the other part, too, that I've heard on like ESPN that you talk about, like NBA has probably got the most, NFL's got a lot more players by number, but NBA has more players, I think, on social media, interacting with fans and just making themselves more accessible, which I think is going to bring people to watch what this guy does. I watch him doing whatever he does on a daily basis. Now it'd be kind of cool to see how he actually plays. Yeah. And I think baseball's starting to do that, but I don't know that. I mean, you can't really push it. There's some guys that just do it and some guys that don't. But I think that would be part of it, because you would draw in people that just, maybe you're a social media, maybe social media is your sport, right? And you start seeing all these personalities like, oh, this guy plays hockey, so I'm going to see how good of a hockey player is. He sounds like he's a pretty good player. Yeah. Or football, like I said, a lot of these personalities that you don't normally see because they're behind helmets. They have a face, they have a life, they have something of interest other than football, so they're going to pull people into their sport. And I think baseball just probably needs to do a better job than that. I know they started doing it now where you go to the parks and you can be on the board, and I think that's more of the changes that they need to make rather than to the game itself. Yeah. Because I think if you start watching, it's like I don't watch college football. Mostly because I don't know any of the players. It's just a football game to me. I would just as soon go to a college game as a high school game because I don't know anybody playing. Yeah. You'd have to love the sport to watch it. So I think that change is going to give them more of what they're looking for rather than, changing the game itself, the rules and how it's played, because I think you're going to lose just as many of the higher end pain, because how it's generational. Guys your age that are now coming into their disposable income and they have kids now that they want to take to the game. You're the guys that buy the box seats and buy the suites and things like that. The younger generation that's into social media, they're not going to spend money to get. If that's what your target is, then you need to market to those people that have it. That's why oldies is coming back from.
And I think, the first Dodgers have been decent with it, but Trevor Bauer is exceptional at it, right? And like the whole Tatis look back, and then he struck out Tatis the first time he saw him, and they nodded at each other, and the DeGrom Bauer spat at the beginning of the season. You really want DeGrom and Bauer to pitch against each other. And like it brings an extra intensity to the game that otherwise still exists, right? It's the Dodgers and the Padres. Yeah. And their games are always super intense. But then there's one-on-one rivalries that would bring, interest to an otherwise boring Angels-Royals game potentially, right? And so, interacting with, creating a name for yourself within a team, whereas before the old school way is, no, you don't stray away from the team, this is us against them type of thing, it still has its own beauty to it. Yeah. But at the same time, I think highlighting that individual matchups, which is what NBA is, right? You isolate the guy and you let him go one-on-one with another guy, and whoever does that better on any given team is typically going to win. I think that's also part of the reason why NBA is so good at it, is because it's inherently built that way.
Yeah, I think I still watch. I've favored a few more teams now, mostly because by the time I get home, the only thing on MLB is it's all West Coast, so I'll see Mariners, Giants, Padres, which those are all the teams I favor anyway. But, when I watch those, I just think they have more of the younger players that kind of are a little more animated. I'm not big on a lot of the over antics, things like that. I'm also like, hey, I'll just buzz one by his ear, that'll settle him down a little bit. Yeah. But then everybody goes crazy about that. Or, it's just one of those where, okay, if he's professional enough, he's not going to hit you.
Correct.
Go the other way. He's just letting you know in not so many words, I don't want you doing what you're doing. Okay, be a little more. But, I personally, I'm not big on all the home runs. I focus more on the strikeouts.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, well, yeah, he hit 40, but he struck out 200 times. Well, Dave Kingman did that.
Yeah.
Every Rob Deere did that. There's been guys in the last 50 years that hit a lot of home runs, but they also strike out the other time. So eventually that's going to catch up with a lot of guys and teams that are going to realize that that's like the Yankees are looking at that right now.
100%.
Yeah.
They get hot and they win games
Yeah.
when multiple guys hit bombs, and when
Yeah.
they don't, I mean, that's what the Dodgers, I think, are going through too,
Yeah.
right? They're like, oh, we won 8 out of 10, and then we lose, 4 out of 5, and it's just streaky.
Yeah.
Now, and it's, I don't know, it's hard for me, like Yasmani Grandal, right? On base percentage is like top 10, but he's hitting under 200. And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
that's not okay to me. But simultaneously, because it's part of the 3 true outcome, he's considered a very valuable catcher.
Yeah.
But it's hard. I mean, part of the thing I did when I was growing up is I collected baseball cards, right? And there was this huge card surge because no one had any. They couldn't spend their disposable income. But when I was growing up, baseball was king, right? They sold for more money. There was more interest, and that was in the early to late 90s. And then now all of a sudden, football and basketball cards were super cheap. All of a sudden now are selling for more, even though like Prism or Panini rather is just completely destroying it. And everyone's like, oh, this card's valuable because there's only 99 of them made, yet everybody's grading everything and there's thousands of these cards yet. So how is there any rarity?
Right.
So it's like there's a card bubble bursting, but everybody's, you're interested in football, so people buy this card because they're interested in this player.
Yeah.
And you're seeing that baseball cards are selling for a lot less money because it's not an investment like it used to be. It's more just about buying your favorite guy, thinking it's going to be an investment, but not understanding economic principles to realizing we're 2 or 3 years away from a bubble bursting. But it's not I'm buying my favorite player now. It's I'm buying guys that are valuable, and they're valuable because they generate social media presence. Sure. And more people like them and know them, so more people buy their cards.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of frustrating to me. Major League Baseball has really kind of, has dropped the ball tremendously over the last 10 years in regards to how they could have grown. And they're focusing on the product and trying to change the product when in fact they need to change the way they market the game.
Yeah.
And allow the players to market the game and keep the game the same.
Well, what's interesting, a couple things. One, I'm thinking as we were talking about the pitching, how long ago was it? Maybe 10 years ago when they were talking about how the pitching was so much more dominant than the hitting back then again, or it was watered down rather.
Yeah.
When they had their expansion.
They were talking about raising the mound.
Right, doing things because the there wasn't enough pitching. There was guys coming up that shouldn't be there because there was just not enough of it. And now here we are, fast forward, and now they're saying the pitching is dominant. Okay, well, that's going to shift. It's you can go back and you can look at the timeline of baseball, and you always have these guys that come along, in your 60s, your 70s, your 80s. There's always going to be your over-dominant pitchers. And then there's going to be way more average, above-average pitchers. And like you talked about, if you look at the streaks on some of those teams, like I haven't looked, but I'd be willing to bet who the Astros are playing. I don't think they've beat any of the top pitching teams in those games, And you look at the Dodgers too. You go back and I think about when they lost that first World Series.
Against the Astros, 2017.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed, and before any of the other stuff came out, my thought was there's nobody making an adjustment. Everybody, maybe 1 or 2 guys, and this will lead into my next one. 1 or 2 guys would go up, and you could see them trying to work directional with the ball rather than trying to tilt and lift. And then I was telling John the other day, I said, I've watched enough Dodger games now because they're playing the Padres. I said, I'm trying not to convince myself that Taylor's their best guy.
Yeah.
I want to not to, but I watch him hit every time, and I said you can see him adjusting. I saw him
in the at bat.
Yeah, I saw him go. He first at bat he made an out, and then he ends up 3 for 4.
Yeah.
But he comes up, and I said I've seen him shorten his swing, I've seen him lengthen his swing, I've seen him come out of his shoes on a swing.
Yeah.
I said, but he actually is thinking through his at bats, and I said every time I've watched the guy, he's gotten 2 or 3 hits.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out what are the rest of them doing in the dugout when he's batting.
Yeah.
Are they not, you know?
Yeah.
And I thought maybe that kind of helped when they got rid of Peterson, because Peterson one was with those big. Bellinger looked, last time I saw him out, he not this year, but prior to that, he looked like he was kind of coming around a little bit and maybe trying to shorten up and not be so pull happy.
Yeah.
Turner's pretty consistent, but he can get a little front fly, and so it's just one of those things where I don't necessarily think that everyone's gotten it, and I don't know that their productivity's gotten that low that they're going to make any changes.
Correct. And that's the hard part, right? Like, you see them turn it on. So, like, Bellinger came up after his long injury with his broken fibula, and he was like 0 for 12 or something. And all of a sudden, his back elbow doesn't dip anymore. He stays on top of the ball, hits a line drive to center field. And I'm like, this guy has the talent to probably hit 380 and hit 25 bombs, but instead he wants to hit 260 and hit 45.
Yeah.
And so, like, I feel that they know that they can turn it on, right? That Mookie can go the other way, get on base. I mean, that man, like, there has to be some sort of statistic. They're starting to measure base paths, but that man is one of the best base runners I've seen in my life. And, like, his ability in the World Series last year to go from third to home on, 80, high 80s, low 90 ground balls to guys pulled in and still score is just astonishing to me, his reaction time and whatnot. And yet the fact that he's not trying to get on base more with simple plays, and he's trying to, hit doubles, or hit home runs, when any guy hits a gapper and he's scoring from first base 99% of the time. It's like, why not just try to get on base more?
Yeah.
Right. Or, you could see Red turn it on and say, okay, I know how they're playing me. I'm going to hit, like, the way he hits most of the time, almost always will get the second baseman up the middle, and then at will he could drive the ball into that gap with almost any pitch. And yet he doesn't do it all the time. And I know he probably has to continue to hit his normal way to have that gap when he wants it. But if the guys have that type of bat control, and I understand that the 3 true outcome wants you to get to second because the score probabilities are higher and wants you to get here. But the Dodgers are such a talented team that they just need to trust the talent if everybody else buys into that theory. And I just have a feeling that they're just waiting to turn it on in the second half, like they've done when they were 9 games back and they still came back to win the division by 5+ games in previous seasons. And I don't know, I guess it's frustrating because I sit and I watch a lot of games, right? Because usually kids are getting ready for bed at 7:30, which means I can turn the game on in the 3rd inning, and then I watch the game, while browsing my phone until 10 or so. Then I go to sleep, and that's how I spend most of my nights during the season. And it's not fun to watch a game when I know the team's not competing at their highest level. They're going after the stats.
Yeah.
Now, there are guys that you understand that for, like Peterson, right? He was signed. But, and I think that's what makes the Padres so good is Tatis and Machado are signed. And so now they just want to win. They don't have to worry about stats anymore. And so they buy in, and when their 2 best guys buy in, the rest of the team is going to follow suit. And guess what? That's going to get Cronenworth paid more money. That's going to get Grisham paid more money. And that's how those teams eventually fall apart when guys leave and the team can't really afford them anymore.
Right.
But and that's why, as much as I hate the Padres, because I'm such an emotional fan, it's so awesome to watch them play the Dodgers. But simultaneously, when I try to watch them play, they're not doing that night in and night out, and they try to, and like you can see the difference in Machado's swing when he's trying to get on base and steal bases versus when he's trying to hit bombs.
Yeah,
and I just don't understand. When I was there, it's like you got a hitter's count 2-1, 2-0, 3-1. You're looking for something at a specific spot, and you're gonna come out of your shoes. That's okay to me. But when it's 1 and 2, you shouldn't be swinging that way anymore. And I just don't see that in the game.
Yeah, and I think a lot of them. I think from what I've seen more, I don't think the velocity is much the issue. I think it's just the offshoot of that. So if you're dialed up trying to always catch 96, 97, you're going to be a lot more susceptible to sliders, curveballs,
high spin rates, etc.
And I think that's mostly what gets them. But with the Dodgers, part of me wonders, couple things. When they got Pujols, my thought was that the Angels kind of missed out on that window because of COVID. You know, he was going through where he's passing everybody on the RBI list of homers. So they missed out on all the free bobbleheads, the towels, you know, bringing in people. And so the Dodgers figured out, well, if we keep him the rest of the season, we're not paying for him. And he's still a smart hitter. He's a good hitter.
Yeah.
He can probably teach these guys a lot of things. And if they won't buy in on their own, then I got a guy sitting in their ear on the bench talking about hitting with these guys.
Yeah, it's an investment across the board, right? Like Mookie is struggling right now. We got 12 more years, 11 more years with him. And so, right, having Pujols teach him is like, hey, it sucks when you suck.
Yeah.
And yet you're still walking out on the baseball field, and unless you're playing Mike Trout or Fernando Tatis, you're probably the best player out there, regardless, even on your worst days. And having to deal with that, and Pujols went through all that, you know, and teaching Bellinger and teaching other guys who have a high ceiling. But that's what's frustrating, right? It's like Pujols is so limited. His bat speed is so down, yet you see him when he wants to putting the ball in the first, second base hole.
Right.
And or knowing he's going to be able to hit this pitch for a single, and it won't be hit hard.
Right.
You know, it might be an 82-degree seeing eye or 2 mile per hour seeing eye hit, but he can do it because he's that talented with his hands. And there are guys on the team who can do that.
Right.
But they don't choose to do that.
Right.
And so because and yet it's like with Bellinger's shoulder. Right, like you saw Tatis already make that adjustment, which is insane to me. He takes pitches in hitters counts, pitches he knows he's going to get, and just hit monster bombs. Yet you also see him adjust his swing to two-handed when he finishes, and still hit doubles and singles and steal bases. Like he just understands the game. I think part of that comes from being raised by a major league dad.
Right.
But I haven't seen Bellinger make that adjustment yet, which part of me is kind of excited about. Maybe we can re-sign him for cheaper than otherwise, although Boris is his agent, so maybe not. But, and you see Seager. I mean, Seager was on fire in the postseason, but there are times where he's swinging at the first pitch, every time grounding out to the first baseman. You're like, see some pitches, dude. Like, work the count, which is also why you love Chris Taylor. I mean, he had that 14-pitch at-bat for the bases-clearing double against the Cardinals, and that was just something to behold. It's like he's adjusting, and his adjustments in at bat were just so far ahead from what that relief pitcher could do. He knew it was coming, when it was coming, and the fact that he could hold off on a couple of off-speed pitches. He knew what Yachty was trying to do. Yeah, and it was just so amazing. And like you can see Rizzo doing that too in his 14-pitch go ahead home run as well. You don't see that anymore. Right.
Well, you know what? When I see Taylor hit, what reminds me of when we do that game where I'd get the tee, and you guys would have 3 guys up. And first guy, you had all 3 fields to hit to. Second guy, you had whatever to his left. If you're the third guy, you only have that one option. It kind of looks, when he gets to the plate, he's like, well, nobody else is going to cut down their swing, so somebody's got to get on base. So might as well be me. So instead of everybody else coming up, and I just saw that first guy flail at 3 curveballs in the dirt, and then the guy does the same thing right after him, and the pitcher didn't even have to change his approach. We'll just keep chucking him in the dirt, and you'll keep swinging at him. But he seems like he's the only one. Turner, I've seen him do it a little bit more recently, but I think when they're going good, then they all want to take that big swing. Yep. When they're going bad, everybody kind of reluctantly, okay, I'll take that. You know, nobody wants to be the one that sacrifices, and which I think it's a rough game to play. They have enough talent, but they lost one. May Seager's hurt again, right? Yeah, he's coming back. He'll probably be back by the All-Star break. But I mean, I think though it was like when we lost the 2018 series to the Red Sox, and we hit more bombs. We had more guys on base, I think, but they were just passing the baton, hitting singles and doubles. Then all of a sudden we got to the 2020 postseason, and we started to take up that philosophy. And then all of a sudden, guess what? We started winning, and we won well. I mean, we should have beat the Rays in 5 if it wasn't for, those 3 terrible T-ball plays all simultaneously. It's something where it's frustrating when you see them play at that level, and it's like, hey, maybe Turner doesn't hit 25 bombs. He hits 12, but hits 330. I mean, that's what I want to see. Yeah.
Right. And like, I don't know if we'll see that for some time unless, banning the sticky stuff really does help averages as much as everybody expects. Where like, you would have a batting title where like Ichiro would be hitting 340, have 240 hits in a season.
Yeah.
You won't see that anymore. And so it's frustrating because like I loved watching Tony Gwynn hit, right? I loved watching Ichiro hit. And we don't really have those types of players anymore.
What's interesting you said that, because I was thinking about that too when they talk about the pitchers having such a dominant standing right now over the hitters. I'm thinking, no, I kind of feel like those guys would still hit. Good hitters are still going to hit.
Yeah.
Because I just feel like there's more all or none guys, and I don't necessarily think it's the hitting in general. And I think it's, if they started to put I guess stipulations in contracts. Hey, you get paid X amount, but if you strike out over 200 times, then
exactly.
$500,000.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden they'll put a little bit more emphasis on it. But I don't know. Again, I'm not convinced that the game itself. I think it's just there's outer lying things that they can do to improve it.
Right.
You look at before they retracted all the minor league teams, I mean, that was the concept they went on.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big deal if somebody was rehabbing, but most nights you didn't have that.
Yeah.
You just had to get more fan interaction. You had to make it more of an event for them.
Mm-hmm.
The game was just kind of background noise, and some people would watch it and follow it for the guys that might move up. But a lot of times there was always something going on. There was a draw in every inning or a dizzy bat race or something like that. And I think that is how they survived.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't essentially on the game itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you get more interaction, because that's essentially what people want. You look at all the crazies, NBA, the guys running on the field or on the court, and you'd find things at the major league stadiums to get fans more involved. We went, had to be 6 years ago now, maybe. We went to the second to the last game at San Francisco. I forgot what it's called now. It's not AT&T. Is it something else now? It might have been AT&T at the time.
Yeah, I forget the name of the park.
But it was Fan Appreciation Weekend. And so they were raffling things out based on your seat.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, they must have given out – the game we went to, they must have given out 30 things.
Yeah.
And when we're walking out, there's people walking out with these giant big screen boxes, and they were giving away trips and boat fishing trips. And, I mean, you had to pay attention every changeover because they were just throwing stuff out.
Yep.
And then at the end, all of the team came out after the game, and they all kind of took turns on those. Hunter Pence was still on this, so I remember him talking, Posey, Bumgarner. So they were out there for probably 25 minutes just kind of yakking on the mic, thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. And I was like, that was probably the most interaction experience I felt like at a major league game.
Yeah.
Other than just, well, here's the game, go buy hot dogs, buy things, and we're done. But I think that was something, and now they can't afford to do that every game, I'm sure, but still there's other things they can do to make it more family enticing.
Well, I mean, like Major League Baseball was the first sport to do this, right? The seventh inning stretch has been around for over a century, and everybody doesn't want to be out of their seats when we're singing that because it's part of the experience.
Yeah.
And so it's just, ever since I think probably like the 80s, even early 90s, right after the strike, Major League Baseball has always been trying to regain the what it once had. And so it's all based on I think it's focusing on the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Right. You build a game that's fun and watchable, and viewership will come, as opposed to manipulating things, trying to get more viewers.
Yeah.
And measuring success by viewership.
Yeah.
But kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, right? With today's information, right, and the shifts and all that other stuff, with Tony Gwynn would have hit 500.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's like, it's like I'm gonna hit it into that as a lefty into the short third hole, and then they shift over there, and then he hits it into the first, and then he hits it up the middle, and I feel like there are guys out there that are talented enough to do that, but just choose not to. And I guess it's because the Red Sox turned around and adopted Moneyball and then won several World Series in 4 or 5 year stretch, and then everybody started doing it. You have to, hopefully in the next collective bargaining agreement, something comes up so as to, cut down on strikeouts, or to, have just natural incentives that all players have when they sign. When they get over 200 hits, they get this amount of money. They get this amount of money for that type of thing. And so once players get paid for that, they're probably going to want to follow suit and cut back on it.
Which, too, thinking about that, I was just trying to go, like, we have a really nice setup at our house. And so for me watching the game, and then part of it, the drive and the crowd and everything else, I said, but there's definitely a different experience. And where you think about a regular baseball game, I think there's just so many of them, like we talked about. If I were to go to BJ's and watch a Dodger game, unless I'm with a bunch of Dodger fans or Giant fans or whoever's playing, we're not going to get as into it as on a Sunday.
Correct.
When you've got 5 NFL games going on in the morning. I said, it's a different sport to sit and watch. Yeah. And I think that's something that I don't know that they've actually completely looked at. I mean, it doesn't make sense changing something away from what it completely is, because that's not the reason people are watching anyway. They're watching football because it's a totally different animal. You're watching baseball because it's a totally different animal. I mean, even any people that love baseball, I've asked people about this too. I come home and a lot of times I'm not even really watching it. It's just background noise for me. Yeah. It's like someone that plays jazz music in their house. It just makes them feel good to hear it. I put it on, I hear it, I listen, and I hear, there's another walk. Then I pay attention because I know something's going on. But it's always there in the background. I listen to like Hershiser and the guys that know what they're talking about, and I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't know that about this guy. Or, they start talking about someone specific, and then I kind of check in. But it's just not something that I'm going to sit for 3 hours and watch. Now, there's days where it'll be on TV all day, like on a Saturday, and I'll sit and have lunch, or I'll sit and have breakfast, and then I'll come back and it's on again, and I'll flip around just to see different teams. But it's not like football where I'll park myself for 3 hours and not move to watch. It's just not. It's just not that kind of sport. If there was
I mean, I think fantasy has really put football on the map. People who would never like sports, never watch sports, still don't really understand the game of football, but are playing fantasy for money or for pride or whatnot, I think has brought in a lot of viewers. And it's difficult to do that with baseball because it's not as exciting. But part of why I love baseball is, like, I can be with my family while still taking in a game. Yeah. And I think, too, again, going back to making me feel older, blaming social media and stuff, right, is everybody's attention span is so short now that the ability to just spend time with my kids, right? I remember my 6-year-old, the Dodgers, it was at the beginning of the win streak. They had hit, like, I think a grand slam in two grand slams in one game. And my 6-year-old was like, yelling upstairs to my older son, "Oh, the Dodgers hit a slam jam," is what he calls it. And so anytime the Dodgers hit a home run, we call it a slam jam in our family text thread with my brother and my dad. And so it's just stuff like that, like sitting in that they know the players, they're learning the game, when I get to, like, kind of teach them things about the game while they're learning, while they're watching, because it's just something they want to do what I think is fun. Yeah. And, and that's also, I think, one of the benefits of not having screens is they're not sitting there on their tablet while I'm watching a game knowing nothing what else is going on. Sure. And it's allowing them to, I think, allowing us to be closer. And it's also part of, it was really nice that one of the positives of my kids staying home for school this whole last year was they got a lot closer. We were able to, I think, instill a lot more things into them, and worried about when they go back to school how quickly that disintegrates. Yeah. But, I think their love for baseball, at least to watch baseball, has partially been instilled in them because of COVID, which is nice. Plus, they got to watch me experience the first time I ever remember seeing the Dodgers win a championship, and they got to see it happen. They probably won't remember it, right? I was 3 years old when they won the 88 series, and my dad can tell the exact story, how I reacted when he screamed of them winning the 88 World Series, and I'll be able to do that with my kids. And but it's, I don't know. I mean, I love baseball, and I'm just worried that too many things will change to take it away from the game that I grew up with and the game that I love watching. And so I'm just hoping that we'll be able to kind of get that hammered out with the next CBA. Yeah, just in general, I don't worry as much as I did initially, because I think, for not that there was anything positive about COVID, I just think that
it was a kind of a wake-up call for everything. I don't know one person that can say that. I mean, and I've made this comment to a couple people. I go, if there was a reason for it, there's not anybody that's been alive in the last year that can not say we don't all have something in common now.
Yeah.
And so there's no way you can ever say you can't relate to somebody anymore, because everything happened to everybody. We all experienced it the same way for the first time. You're from a different angle from the medical side. I said, but there isn't everybody that didn't know somebody that it affected, or just hearing things and the way you felt about hearing those things and the uneasiness and the uncertainty. And then it changed businesses. It changed the way people go to work or go to school or go. So there's not too many people that didn't have some type of change in their life. So some of it good, because it was time for some things to change. Some businesses that didn't survive probably didn't have a strong enough model, or some businesses that thrived might have been just in the right place at the right time. Schools, I think, I tell my wife, and your wife might agree, I said, that cat's out of the bag now. It's not going back. Now you can't tell people that you can't learn from home, because they just did it. And for most of the high school kids, I said, well, get used to it, because when you move on to college, most of your classes are going to be online. Or
have some online component.
Right. So you just got kind of an on-the-job training and learning how to do it. Some people struggled. Some people prospered. So it's, with baseball, I think people had a chance to miss it because they got kind of a watered-down form of it. And then going back to the stadium, I think some people that really missed it are probably going to try to more, because now you have that fear that it'll get taken away again for some reason. And I think just the whole way that people look at sports, concerts, congregating in general, I think is going to help bring everything back. But I think for baseball, it's not going to go away. I think you're just going to have people kind of love it a different way. And I think part of all of the issues that they have, it creates more talk. I mean, we've spent probably an hour just talking about different changes and nothing, no games specifically. But, I think that's going to bring in some people that are interested now by, well, what are they talking about? What's a shift, or what's, just any kind of publicity sometimes is good publicity. So I think that'll create more. Or, my wife asked me the other day when we were watching the game about one of the Padres, which is the controversial guy that doesn't like the Dodgers. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then she's not Machado, the guy with the long. I go, what? No, what's wrong with him? She goes, no, he isn't the one that, didn't he play with the Dodgers? And no, I go, Machado was with the Dodgers. And I go, they just let him go because they only brought him in to help him win.
Yeah, because Seager was out for the year.
And I said, but they had no intention of paying him the $300 million that the Padres did. I said, there was no beef or anything like that. I go, just some people don't like him because he can be a jerk, but it's one of those guys. If he's on our team, he's a good jerk. If he's on your team, he's a jerk.
Trevor Bauer is exactly that way too.
So, but she really didn't know. She just was watching it, and like I said, for me, I like watching the screen there at Petco, because that's, again, for me, that's another one too. When we go to the stadiums, I watch the game, but I enjoy kind of seeing what they've done to the stadiums to make them more friendly, to make it more, hey, you don't have to sit there for 7 innings and you can wander around. And we've got this
Dodger Stadium just did that. I went there for one of their last games before the reopening day. It was against the Giants when they beat the bejesus out of us. But like the outfield was completely redone. You can now walk around the entire park, which was completely brand new. I remember, we had, so in 2020, right after we traded for Mookie Betts, and we were going to have the All-Star game. And I was like, okay, well, how do I guarantee, like, I had spent so much money in 2017 and 2018 on third-party vendors to go to games in the postseason with my family, and like my dad, my brother, and I went to the Game 7 of the 2017 World Series, and we were like in the outfield, like 3 rows from the back, and it was like $1,500 a seat, right? But it was like we wanted to be there, and because we might not ever be at a Game 7 of a World Series ever again, And I'm like, and I called and I figured out all these things, and I was able to shell away enough to have like partial season tickets, so that we were guaranteed at least the All-Star game or the Home Run Derby, and we were guaranteed at least 4 seats for all levels of the playoffs. And then of course the season gets canceled, no fans, we get our money back, and but and it was all about preparation for that. So now I'm like, do I really want to maybe try to do that for next year? Because by then, knock on wood, COVID's better and we don't have to worry about anything anymore because vaccination rates are higher, and we've gotten vaccination rates in third world countries down enough such that we don't have to worry about variants coming out every month. But then we'll also have the All-Star game back again and all those experiences, because it's all about making memories, that my kids will remember forever and that I'll remember forever. But it's the experience with how they redid the outfield is completely different, right? I went with my brother, and he's got a 1-year-old. I got a 1-year-old nephew now, and there were times they had to feed him. They had to go change his diaper. He was a little irritable, so they walked around the entire park for the first time, and and so, I remember I took my oldest son when he was under a year old, which was a huge mistake because you don't realize how loud a stadium is until you have a baby. But, we had nowhere to go.
Right.
We were outside as far away from the noise as we could, but we couldn't walk around the stadium. We couldn't do any of that. It wasn't particularly friendly to young children. And now it is, right? It's all about revamping that entire experience, which is really nice.
Yeah, and I think that's huge. I mean, I enjoy going to the new stadiums and seeing all the things that they've added in there. And it's kind of curious how you can see that, okay, well, if you like watching the games at your local bar, well, we're going to bring the bar to you because now we've got one in here. Or, if you like your really, really nice steakhouse and you can't go to the steakhouse because they don't put TVs up there, well, we got a really nice steakhouse and here's your TV. So they've done everything they can to keep you there. And, we went to Petco one time, and I took my son-in-law, and he's a big microbrew guy. And so we were there, and they had the one where they've got this long table, and it goes about halfway into the aisle, and then they've got the board with all of the different beers in there, and there's TVs on both sides. And I'm like, well, there you go. You pay to come in, pay for your seat, but you're not in it. You're sitting here drinking beer because they're not bringing it to you anymore. And I go, but they got you. They got your ticket to the game. Now they get your beer money. I go, now they get your pub money because you're sitting here eating chips at the game.
100%.
Yeah, and then right about 100 yards away is your seat, and you can see it live, but you're watching it on TV. You could have done it at home. Yep. And he's like, oh, that's genius. I go, well, that's why they make so much money, and nobody worries about them going out of business. But anyway, that has been fun. I'm getting a little hungry. I cut back on breakfast this morning because I figured we'd go afterwards. But man, it was good chopping up the baseball with you. We'll have to get to a game sometime.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Find one that nobody's going to, so we won't have a hard time getting seats together. We got one of my former guys. He's moved to Vegas, but he and his family are Padre fans too, so they have season seats, and so he can't come down all the time. So he'll always text me, hey, if you ever want, let me know. And we went a couple months ago, I think it was right when season opened in April, and it was we got 2 of them out in the outfield. And now he's texting me, he's like, hey, if you're vaccinated, they've got this side now, and he says now they're wide open. And so when we're going again in the 9th, I think it was just 2. And so now, because we'll have my niece and my daughter, and I go, now I got to find 10 tickets, and I got to try to get them all, but he doesn't know specifically where they're going to be until about a week before. I'm like, man, you're really putting that pressure on me, because then I got to find all together. I know where the original 2 are, but then I've got to try to find 8 in that same area too. But it'll be fun.
I don't know how they do it with the Dodgers. It's this really great system where so you have a base price that you pay for your seat, and that price changes, right? If we're playing the Yankees, it's going to be $70 a seat, whereas if we're playing the Pirates, it might be $30 a seat. But what you could do is you can just put your seats into a trading system, or like, for example, right, we were going to buy 4, but like we could do 3 games of 4 in the outfield to have 4 seats behind home plate. Or we could put our 4 seats into the market, which gives us the ability to put 4 seats so we can have 8 seats, and that could be all throughout the park. And so the idea is it's a much better experience for, if you can't, you have to be able to attend a certain amount of games in order for it to count. But you also can potentially manipulate it so I could have 12 people come and I use 3 games worth of seats. And it doesn't have to be like, those are my seats all the time.
Wow, okay.
And so they might have something similar with the Padres. Yeah. So that would be something you could look into.
Yeah, I'll have to look, because we've always just kind of, hey, what's a free weekend? Hey, look, they're in town this week. Because most of the time, and then my daughter too, you don't think 52 weekends will fill up that fast.
No, yeah.
But when you go through and they're just not,
Yeah.
So trying to find that, because that was the only time. And then I think the next time I got seats from him isn't until maybe the second to the last September.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the last homestand. So other than that, because most of the time we don't like to drive back. So we get a hotel. So after the game, we just go to the hotel. And then in the morning we wake up and head out and have breakfast. But because we tried it a couple times where we drive down, drive back. And, most of the time it's her, those darn free beers. But, it's just a long drive. It's straight. It's easy. And that's what I always liked about it, compared to going into L.A. or Orange County. But it's still, I think it's 94 miles from our house to Petco.
That is a drive. Yeah, I mean, I live, I think, like 5-7 miles from Angel Stadium. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, I swear if I was an Angel fan, I would be in heaven. But, what we're going to try to do, I think, we would like to try to wait until ideally my 2 boys can get vaccinated. And once they're vaccinated, we don't really have to worry anymore. But, pretty much anytime the Dodgers play, we're going to try to get seats.
Yeah.
And, it works out because my cousin and her husband are big time Angel fans. And so we can all kind of go as a family and spend more time together.
Yeah.
That's what I miss, right? Like there are these memories I have going with my dad, with Raul Mondesi, and I remember we were playing the Mariners right when interleague play first opened, and there was this huge fight between the Mariners and the Dodgers, and my brother's favorite player, Jay Buhner, was on the disabled list and wasn't supposed to be on the field, but he sprints out into the fight, and and there are memories like that, seeing Hideo Nomo and seeing Chan-Ho Park and booing, calling out to Barry Bonds from the left field pavilion. And I just, there's nothing that can, to me, especially as the home viewership experience gets better,
Mm-hmm.
With my huge TV at home, but I just don't want to, especially as the experience gets better at the parks.
Yeah.
Right. I remember having to pee in the trough at Dodger Stadium. Who are these guys next to me?
Yeah. There's no boundaries there. That is a little awkward. But no, so I mean, this, like I said, this was cool. So we'll have to do them. Maybe we shoot some video next time at the game, or maybe when the games get up, we can get to a UCLA game and and do one of those. That'd be kind of fun. That's as I was going around with the coaches, I told them what I'll do is I had Adrian show me, and I bought a camera and I bought a portable mic, and I have the phone, but I don't know how the audio is going to sound. I tried doing it in the shop, and it didn't work out that much. So what I'll do is I want to get it where I can take it. And I told them, when you guys come to town to, CBU or UCR, I'll do some interviews from the dugout. It'll be a lot briefer, but, at least these are good starts to kind of get used to it. And then I've got to pick Adrian's brain about the video, because either that, I guess I could probably pay him to come and let him do the work. But either way, I definitely enjoy being able to sit down and talk baseball. And like I said, this was more for, it'll probably never make a living on TV, but it's more for me to do something other than just be in the cage all day.
To catch up with people.
Yeah. And it's fun because it always ends up talking baseball. So we'll call this take 1, and then or maybe, I don't know if they'll let me shoot in your office one of these days.
Probably not, but I would have to ask.
Mr. Jones, can you roll over? We're gonna, but I don't know if they'd let you video that. But there's always different things that we can try to get viewers. But again, thank you for coming out. I appreciate you making the drive, and it was a pleasure. We'll have to connect on some Dodger games or Dodger Padre games. So
I'm sure Greg would be interested too.
Yeah. So if I send your boys the hat with the dreadlocks, the Padre, they're not gonna,
no.
That's not gonna.
I don't know if I'd let them wear
the pinstripe.
Unless we dye the hat blue and the braids blue, and then cross out SD or something.
John, he's a big Dodger fan, so he always has kids come in. Yesterday there was 2 kids. One of my kids had a Dodger, and the other one had the cool Dodger hat with the gold on it. And I was joking with him, and I said, I'll give you guys $10 each. Leave those hats on my desk so I have something to spit my seeds in. I'll get you guys some Padre hats when you come. I told him I'm just going to keep a box and then just hand them out. Give me throw it away. But, so like I said, it was cool. We'll definitely have to set something up. Yeah. Maybe we get to a Quakes game or something. That's a Dodger affiliate.
The Rancho Verde.
Yeah, those are always fun now that they're back up and running. But, we'll definitely have to do that. Maybe I'm still pushing for that alumni game. With Steve, if you guys, I'll give you guys a heads up. You got a few months. I don't know if we can make this come in February, but maybe we can push for.
Greg plays softball, so I'd probably have to rejoin a softball league so I don't look terrible.
Is he going to be able to put the gear on? That's the.
I don't know. We'll have to see what his knees are like.
Well, yeah, he does a lot of squatting, so he had to be able to do some blocking.
He can get down and get back up like once or twice, but I don't know about repetitively.
Yeah, so we'll have to. I'll see if we can get that nice padded field, and then I'll see if we can organize some workouts. It might be fun just to video that.
Yeah, right.
You ever see the movie Best of Times? It's an old one with Kurt Russell. You got to see it. So they get this idea with Robin Williams to replay this game, and Robin Williams drops the winning touchdown pass. So he wants to replay this game to kind of remake his image. And so they bring back all the old team, and when the bus shows up, all the old linemen, right, they're all 300 pounds, and one guy's smoking, and so they're trying to get these guys in shape for this one football game. And of course the other team, these guys have all been playing since nonstop, and they're all lifting and running and sprinting, and so it'd be kind of fun video to be like a fantasy camp just to post that. So I'll see if I can organize that. Maybe we can find some of the old uniforms. I don't know if Steve still has them.
Oh yeah.
Interesting. We'd have to just go no buttons, but just leave them open, just T-shirts underneath. But I'll have to ask him when I see him. But anyway, that's something we can shout for. That would actually be fun.
Yeah,
just to kind of get on the field. I'll see if we can get the freshman team. We won't get the varsity guys.
Oh, that'd be a good idea.
But anyway, again, I want to thank my guest, Dr. Matt Diaz, for coming out and making the trip. And again, it was great to do a little reminiscing and hear some back medical knowledge, and then talk Dodger baseball. So I tried to herd him around to Padres, but that wasn't going to work. So I'll see if I can drop some stuff to the boys, maybe some jerseys and maybe a Machado mask or something for them. That might be some entertaining video for you around. But until next time, thanks for watching, and we will see you soon. Thanks.